The time paradox. We are living inside a great cosmic theatre. The curtains open, and the show presented to us does not have just one timeline, but multiple ones. This is where we begin to understand the time paradox, a crazy idea that suggests the future is already written. Watch this video until the end because it will blow your mind. The way we perceive time is divided into 3 stages: past, present, and future. This division is so natural to us that we hardly stop to question it. What would happen if we stopped for a moment to reflect on the true nature of time? You now, watching this video. What you see, what you feel, what you think, all of this is happening in what we call the present. But interestingly, the moment you perceive something, that moment has already turned into the past. The present, then, is a fraction of a second, an undefined point between what has already been and what is yet to come. And the future? The future. An unknown territory, full of possibilities, dreams, and uncertainties. But what if I told you that the future is already written? It sounds like a strange idea, almost like a science fiction script, but there are theories that suggest exactly this. Some theoretical physicists advocate the idea that time may not be linear, as we usually think. They suggest that past, present, and future coexist, like pages of a book. You do not read all the pages at once, but they are all there, already written, waiting to be unveiled. This perspective completely changes our understanding of time. The past is not just a distant memory, but something that still exists. The future is not an indecipherable mystery, but a reality that is already there, waiting to be reached. If these 3 stages are really happening simultaneously, does this mean we are living in a universe where everything is already determined? Or do we have the ability to change what is to come? Think of a trail in the forest. As you walk, each step you take leaves a mark on the ground, and you know exactly where you have been. The present is the step you are taking now, and the future is the path ahead, which has not yet been trodden. But what if this trail is already marked, regardless of whether you have walked on it or not? Every tree, every stone, every curve is already there, waiting to be discovered. Theories about time invite us to imagine a scenario where all temporal stages are intertwined. It is as if we are watching a movie where every scene has already been filmed, but we only see one at a time. Throughout history, the human relationship with time has always been shrouded in mystery and reverence. Time is like an unstoppable river, flowing without pause, carrying with it everything we have done, what we are doing, and what we will do. The past is like a chest of treasures and ghosts. In it, we keep all our experiences, memories, mistakes, and achievements. It is there that we find the lessons we have learned, the loves we have lived, and the pains we have endured. Many of us spend hours reminiscing about the past, either with nostalgia or regret. Have you ever found yourself thinking, what if I had done that differently? Or, what would my life be like if I had chosen a different path? These questions reveal how much we are prisoners of time, captives of our own memories. And then we have the present, this fleeting moment that slips through our hands like sand. The present is where life truly happens, where our actions take shape and our thoughts gain voice. But paradoxically, we are so concerned with what has already passed or what is to come that we often forget to fully live in the now. Think about the times when you were physically present, but your mind was far away, trapped in worries or distant memories. We live constantly trying to capture this ephemeral moment, but it continues to elude us. And what about the future? The future. This vast horizon of possibilities that fills us with hope and at the same time, uncertainties. It is in the future that we place our dreams, ambitions, and fears. We plan, yearn, and sometimes even fear what is to come. What will I be when I grow up? Will I get that job? What will my life be like in 5 years? These questions guide our decisions and shape our present. But at the same time, the future can become an obsession, a constant anxiety about what has not yet happened and that perhaps never will. We become prisoners of time because we romanticize these 3 phases. The past envelops us with its nostalgia, the present challenges us to live fully, and the future seduces us with its promises. This continuous dance between the three stages shapes our perception of life and our identity. However, it is important to remember that despite our tendency to romanticize time, it is relentless and impartial. Time does not stop, does not wait, does not forgive. Our obsession with time is also reflected in the arts, literature, and even in our everyday language. Wasting time, saving time, time is money. These are expressions that show how we measure our lives through the passing seconds. Films, books, and songs often explore the impact of time on the human condition, revealing our constant struggle to understand and control it. But are we really at the mercy of time? Or do we have some power over it? Some philosophers and thinkers believe that the key to a full life is to find a balance between remembering the past, living in the present, and planning for the future, without letting any of these stages dominate us completely. Perhaps the secret is to accept that time is a continuous flow, and that, instead of trying to control it, we should learn to flow with it. Sir Arthur C. Clarke, this brilliant British inventor and writer, gifted us with a futuristic vision that still inspires and challenges our understanding of the world. Best known for his work in science fiction, Clarke not only created fascinating stories, but also introduced concepts that shaped the modern world. One of his most notable contributions to science was the idea of the geostationary satellite. In an article published in 1945, Clarke proposed the use of satellites in fixed orbits above the Earth for telecommunications purposes. This vision became the foundation for global communication as we know it today, enabling the instant transmission of data, television, and telephony around the world. We can say that Clarke literally helped connect the planet, transforming his science fiction into scientific reality. But beyond his inventions, Clarke was also a profound thinker about time and the future. He understood that time is one of the most intriguing and inescapable forces of our existence. One of his most memorable quotes is, "The future is not what it used to be." This seemingly simple phrase carries immense depth. When Clarke says, "The future is not what it used to be," he refers to the constant change in our expectations and visions of what is to come. Think about how we imagined the future decades ago. Many of us grew up with visions of flying cars, domestic robots, and colonies on Mars. Although some of these dreams still seem distant, technology has advanced in ways our predecessors could never have predicted. Smartphones, the internet, artificial intelligence, all these innovations have drastically changed our daily lives and our perception of future possibilities. Clarke makes us realize that the future is a blank canvas, constantly redrawn by new discoveries and human progress. Each technological advance, each new scientific theory, each social change alters the course of what we consider possible. Thus, the future is never static. It is a reflection of our evolving present. For Clarke, science fiction was not just a means of entertainment but a tool to explore and anticipate the future. His works, such as 2001: A Space Odyssey, challenge us to think about the fate of humanity and our relationship with time. He saw science fiction as a laboratory of ideas, where impossible concepts could be tested and imagined, preparing us for the realities that might one day materialize. Returning to his famous phrase, we can also interpret that Clarke warns us about the impermanence of our predictions. What we think the future will be is always subject to change, whether due to new discoveries or unexpected events. This uncertainty is what makes exploring the future so fascinating and at the same time so challenging. Arthur C. Clarke taught us that although we cannot predict precisely what is to come, we can shape the future with our actions and innovations. The perception of time is something that has intrigued and fascinated humanity since ancient times. At first glance, it may seem like a simple concept. 1 second passes, then another, and so on. But when we start to examine how we really perceive time, things become incredibly complex. Think of sound and light, two of the most fundamental ways we interact with the world around us. Both travel through space, but not instantaneously. Sound, for example, propagates at approximately 343 meters per second in the air. When we hear thunder after seeing lightning, the delay is due to the difference in speed between light and sound. Light travels much faster, at nearly 186,000 miles per second, almost instantaneously in our perceptions. Now consider sunlight. The sunlight that warms us and illuminates our Earth takes about 8 minutes to travel the distance of approximately 93 million miles. This means that when we look at the sun, we are seeing it as it was 8 minutes ago. This delay in perception reminds us that time is, in fact, a series of overlapping changes. To expand on this concept, imagine looking at the stars. The light we see from some stars may have traveled for thousands or even millions of years before reaching us. In other words, when looking at the night sky, we are literally looking into the past. This idea is both wonderful and a bit frightening, reminding us that our perception of the universe is always limited by the time it takes for light to travel to us. But what about the human perception of time on a more personal level? Our brains are incredible processing machines that continuously compile sensory information to create our experience of the now. However, this now is not as immediate as we think. The perception of time is, in fact, a series of overlapping changes, a complex blend of memories and sensations. Our brains process different types of information at different speeds. For example, vision is processed faster than sound, and both are processed faster than touch. To create a coherent perception of the present, our brains synchronize these pieces of information from different sources. This process takes time, although it is measured in milliseconds. Thus, the now we experience is actually a slightly delayed reconstruction of what is really happening around us. This difference in perception can be demonstrated in various ways. Think of the experience of watching a video where the sound is not synchronized with the image. This small misalignment makes us uncomfortable because we are used to synchronized processing. Our brain has to work harder to reconcile the discrepancies, reminding us that our perception of time is a carefully constructed illusion. This perception of time can also be influenced by our emotional and physical state. When we are anxious or under stress, time can seem to slow down, each second dragging on endlessly. On the other hand, when we are happy or engaged in an activity we love, time seems to fly by. Our perception of time is, therefore, not only a function of the sensory signals we receive, but also of how we feel about what we are experiencing. The nature of time has always intrigued philosophers and scientists throughout history. Among the great thinkers who have pondered this enigma, René Descartes and Immanuel Kant stand out. Both brought perspectives that shaped our understanding of time and reality. Descartes, the French philosopher famous for his phrase "cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am, questioned the very essence of time. For Descartes, time was a series of continuous moments, a sequence that could only be understood through the rational mind. He saw time as something that could not be separated from movement and change, believing that the existence of time was linked to our ability to perceive and think about it. Immanuel Kant, on the other hand, offered a different view. In his work Critique of Pure Reason, Kant argued that time is not an external entity or an objective reality, but an internal structure of the human mind. According to Kant, time is a form of sensible intuition that we use to organize our experiences. In other words, time, along with space, is a necessary condition for us to perceive and understand the world around us. While classical philosophy established these theoretical foundations, psychology in the 20th century began to explore the perception of time in a more empirical way. Psychologists asked, how do we really perceive time? What are the internal mechanisms that allow us to feel the flow of time? A significant milestone in this investigation was the recognition that the perception of time is influenced by numerous factors, from biological to psychological. Experiments began to show that our sense of time can be altered by external and internal stimuli. A classic example is the perception of time in babies and animals. Research indicates that babies have a temporal perception based on external stimuli. Even without the ability to verbalize or conceptualize time, they respond to rhythmic changes and repetition patterns. For example, Studies have shown that babies can predict events that occur at regular intervals, such as the sound of a metronome. They begin to anticipate the sound before it happens, showing a rudimentary form of temporal perception. Animals, similarly, exhibit a perception of time that is strongly influenced by environmental stimuli. Dogs, for example, can learn to associate the time of day with certain events, such as their owner's arrival or meal times. This demonstrates that temporal perception in animals is adaptive and crucial for their survival. In addition to babies and animals, experiments with adult humans have revealed insights into how time is perceived. A classic study involved asking participants to estimate the duration of time intervals while engaged in different activities. The results showed that the perception of time can vary drastically depending on the level of attention and engagement in the task. When we are deeply focused or interested in something, time seems to pass faster. Conversely, in moments of boredom or waiting, time seems to drag on endlessly. These findings reinforce the idea that the perception of time is subjective and malleable. It depends on a series of factors that interact in complex ways, reflecting both our biological conditions and our emotional and cognitive states. Time is one of the most fundamental forces in the universe, and yet our understanding of it is constantly evolving. The crucial question is time linear, flowing from the past to the present and then to the future? Or is it relative, changing according to our circumstances, as Albert Einstein suggested? Einstein revolutionized our understanding of time with his theory of relativity. Before him, time was seen as a straight and immutable line. But Einstein proposed that time is actually flexible and can be altered by speed and gravity. According to relativity, the faster you move or the stronger the gravitational force, the slower time passes for you compared to someone in a different state. One of Einstein's most famous thought experiments, which perfectly illustrates this idea, is the twin paradox. Imagine two twin brothers. One decides to travel through space in a ship moving at a speed close to that of light, while the other stays on Earth. According to relativity, the traveling twin will experience time much more slowly than the twin who stayed home. When the traveler returns, he will find his brother significantly older than himself. This paradox is not just a theoretical curiosity, it is a reality proven by experiments with subatomic particles and the experience of astronauts who spend long periods in orbit. The movie Interstellar brilliantly addresses this idea. In one of the most impactful scenes, the characters land on a planet where gravity is extremely strong due to the proximity of a black hole. Because of this intense gravity, time on the planet passes much more slowly than on the orbiting ship. For every hour they spend on the planet, years pass on the ship. When they return, they find a crew member drastically aged, while they themselves have barely aged. This cinematic representation viscerally illustrates how the relativity of time can create radically different experiences of time passage for individuals in different circumstances. Beyond physics, many spiritual traditions suggest that time is an illusion. In various Eastern philosophies, such as Buddhism and Hinduism, linear time is seen as a construction of the human mind. They teach that the true nature of reality is timeless, and that past, present, and future are simply modes of mind perception. Meditation and other spiritual practices often aim to transcend this linear perception of time, seeking a direct understanding of the present moment, which is seen as the only true reality. The notion that time is an illusion also appears in some Western traditions. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, for example, argued that time is a form of human understanding, a way by which we organize our experiences, but that has no independent existence outside our perception. Considering these different perspectives, time emerges not as a straight and immutable line, but as something much more complex and mutable. It can be shaped by the physical forces of the universe, as Einstein demonstrated, and also by our perceptions and understandings, as various spiritual traditions suggest. Imagine yourself in solitary confinement, with no windows, no clock, no contact with the outside world, just four walls and absolute silence. In a short time, you would begin to notice something strange happening with your mind. The perception of time would begin to distort. Extreme isolation, as found in solitary confinement, is a condition that can profoundly confuse our perception of time. Without external stimuli to mark the passage of minutes and hours, our brain begins to lose the ability to track time accurately. Studies show that in such conditions, people often lose track of days or even weeks. Time can seem to drag on endlessly or, paradoxically, accelerate in a disorienting manner. To better understand why this happens, we need to consider how we normally perceive time. In our daily lives, we use a variety of external cues to measure the passage of time: the movement of the sun, the exchange of activities, conversations with other people, even the rhythm of meals. These temporal markers help us structure our day and maintain a sense of continuity. In isolation, all these cues disappear. The absence of visual and auditory stimuli puts the brain in a state of sensory deprivation, which can lead to perceptual distortions. Without events to anchor our perception, time becomes an indistinct and amorphous sequence. There are accounts of people who have spent long periods in solitary confinement and described their experiences with time. Many say that after some time, they began to have difficulty distinguishing one day from another. The notion of morning, afternoon, and night dissolved, and time turned into a continuous, indistinguishable mass. For some, the days seemed to merge, while for others, each minute became an unbearable eternity. An extreme example of this can be seen in stories of explorers and castaways who were isolated for long periods. Without clocks or any form of calendar, many reported that their ability to mark the passage of time became severely compromised. In such circumstances, the mind begins to create its own rhythms and cycles, often based on sleep and hunger patterns, but these rhythms are frequently distorted and unreliable. The experience of extreme isolation also reveals something fundamental about human nature: our need for connection and interaction. Time, in many ways, is social. We share our temporal experiences with others, synchronize our schedules, plan joint activities. When this social dimension is removed, not only is our perception of time affected, but also our own identity and sense of reality. Some studies with prisoners of war and survivors of forced isolation indicate that sensory deprivation and prolonged isolation can lead to serious psychological consequences. In addition to temporal distortion, many of these people experienced hallucinations, intense anxiety, depression, and a sense of disorientation that persisted even after returning to a normal environment. In the context of solitary confinement, extreme isolation not only confuses the perception of time, but also highlights the importance of external stimuli and social interactions for our mental health and well-being. Our perception of time is, in large part, a construct that depends on our interaction with the world around us. Without this interaction, time can become an invisible prison, turning minutes into hours and hours into endless days. To understand the complexity of time, scientists and philosophers have developed various theoretical models over the years. One of the most interesting ways to visualize how the past, present, and future can coexist is through the concept of multiple sheets, where each sheet represents a different situation or moment in time. Imagine a book with many pages, where each page represents a specific now, a slice of time frozen in an instant. When you look at the closed book, all the pages exist simultaneously, even though you can only read one at a time. This model suggests that past, present, and future are not sequential events that cease to exist once they pass or do not yet exist until they arrive. Instead, they coexist in a temporal continuum. This idea may seem abstract, but it helps illustrate how time can be perceived as a series of moments that are all present in some way. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity provides a scientific basis for this view. According to Einstein, space and time are intertwined, forming what we call space-time. Instead of seeing time as a straight line, relativity shows us that space and time are part of a unique and flexible structure. This space-time can be curved and distorted by mass and energy, creating a landscape where time can flow differently depending on where you are and how fast you are moving. One of the implications of relativity is that each now is specific and depends on movement in space. This means that what one person perceives as the present can be different for another person moving at a different speed or under different gravitational influence, as mentioned earlier. This phenomenon is known as time dilation. In extreme situations, such as near a black hole, time can distort so dramatically that what seems to be just a few minutes for someone near the black hole can be years for someone far from it, as I mentioned earlier about the movie Interstellar. If each now is relative and depends on the observer, then the past, present, and future are much more fluid than we imagine. This relativity of time challenges our intuitions and makes us rethink the nature of reality. Moreover, this multiple sheet model of time has implications for theoretical physics and cosmology. It suggests that the universe can be seen as a collection of nows that coexist, each representing a different state of the universe at a different moment. This view opens the door to more advanced theories, such as string theory and quantum gravity, which attempt to unify general relativity with quantum mechanics, but I will not talk about that in this video. In summary, theoretical models of time, from the multiple sheets that coexist to Einstein's space-time interconnection, show us that time is a much more complex entity than we can imagine. Each moment is unique and specific, shaped by the space around us and the movement we make through it, offering a new perspective on what it means to live in the present. And if you want to learn a step-by-step method to achieve prosperity based on the universal laws of Hermes Trismegistus, take a look at the pinned comment. Subscribe to the channel and take the opportunity to watch the video that is playing on the screen.